BBC News.
Well, with us now is Barnaby Willitts-King. He's a specialist in humanitarian aid with the Overseas Development Institute and has spent time in Nepal. Thanks so much for coming in to talk to us. First of all, in your view, what kind of help is needed most?
I think the agencies on the ground and the Nepal government have said that there's a range of needs. There's a lot of need for food, clean water, particularly temporary housing. A lot of houses damaged, and so people need tents to live in, as well as a lot of medical support.
So let's talk about the logistics, getting this aid in. How do you do that in a country where my understanding is there's only one airport and it's relatively small?
It's a really big challenge at this stage, and we're seeing lots of problems with getting experts, getting materials into the country. Kathmandu Airport is a very tiny airport, one runway. You can only park maybe a maximum of 7 or 8 aircraft at a time. So if you're unloading cargo, that takes a long time. So there's been a lot of stories, colleagues of mine in the UN who haven't been able to land, who've been there to try and actually help start to set up some of the displaced people camps. And then getting out of Kathmandu, the roads in pretty bad shape, lots of landslides, potentially bridges knocked down, so really hard to get into these very remote mountainous areas.
And in terms of distributing the aid, you've got that problem, but also, I mean, before the earthquake even started, this is very mountainous terrain, isn't it?
Absolutely. People in the villages that are affected near the epicentre, they would normally walk for 1 or 2 days just to reach the shop where they can buy, you know, their rice and other basic provisions. So the challenge of actually getting aid to them, getting medical relief to them is a huge challenge, and really at the moment only really helicopters where they can land, which isn't always possible. There's some airdropping going on from helicopters, of tents, of medical equipment, but a huge challenge.
And weather, does that affect this as well?
The weather will make it harder, I mean, both for the people who are living in temporary shelters, tents, but also for helicopters that can't fly when the conditions are very bad. Very difficult conditions weather-wise, and as the monsoon approaches, that's also going to make things harder. That's going to increase the likelihood of landslides, so more roads will get blocked, again, as a compounding factor.
As I said, you've worked in Nepal for 3 years. Whereabouts were you, and what can you tell us about where you were?
So I lived in Kathmandu with my family, and we spent a lot of time in the city and in the valley that's been affected. But we also travelled to areas quite similar to where the earthquake was, the epicentre of the earthquake. Kathmandu is an ancient city, very narrow streets in the old city in the centre. So there will be a lot of problems just getting to the people who've been affected, a lot of old buildings that have fallen down. And then outside, incredibly dramatic mountain scenery, but very, very hard to get around, very dispersed population.
I mean, there are roads, are there?
There are roads only so far. You have to do a lot of walking. You spend a lot of time walking in Nepal. So the roads, if they're not blocked, they're not paved roads. They go a certain way up, but a lot of the population lives in very remote, small settlements dotted around on hillsides, very steep slopes. And so it's really, the only way in is walking, or you can use animals to transport, so mules are often used to transport goods around the mountains, but it's foot power that's the main way that people get about, and that goods and relief in this situation will probably be distributed to those far-flung locations.
I mean, the way you talk about it, it sounds almost impossible that people in the remotest areas are going to get the help they need.
I think there's going to be a lot of hidden suffering. I think there's going to be lots of people who can't actually receive the aid. I think people who will be able to move will probably try and come down to the larger areas of settlement near the roads. But those who can't move, who can't be carried, who aren't fortunate enough to be evacuated by helicopter, I think there's going to be some pretty awful situations out there.
OK, Barnaby Willitts-King, thanks so much for coming in to talk to us. Thanks.